All right, here we go. Welcome to episode number 14 of Burn Rate and Beyond. My name is Chad Fultz, and I'm here with the always smiling and happy Jeffrey Mazza.
Hey everybody, how are you?
Good stuff. Good stuff. It's great summer day here. Excited for the end of the summer. I think Jeff, you were mentioning your kids are going back to school, and that is a small triumph.
That is a big triumph, not small. We're excited to have the house back and nice and quiet, and the dog and I during the day.
That's good. That's good stuff. Well, awesome. Today we are talking about building robust forecasting models. So that is sort of our next phase here in this topic of working on CFO action. And I guess my question is, let's just kind of rehash, what is forecasting? How do you define that?
Yeah, I mean, forecasting is, in my mind, it's a process of, I like to say, you have the historical data, right? The accounting side, making sure everything that took place is entered in the system. And then that forecasting is, how do we use that information to help navigate where that business is going? So it's kind of it's the process, I should say, of using that data, any sort of trends and assumptions, just so you can help make informed projections or predictions about the future performance, and it can really help the business anticipate any sort of unforeseen events down the road, just so they're prepared. So that's kind of how I look at forecasting. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the same thing is that it's taking old information or information in the past and trying to use it to predict the future. I always think about the analogy to the weather. There's every day on the whatever used to be on the evening news or now on the app on your phone or whatever it is, it's like, what's the forecast for the weather, right? And so it's taking all the information that's available at the time to say this is what we think, to the best of our knowledge, is going to happen in the future.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, like, what in the world of accounting or finance, there's another thing called a budget. Now, is a budget and a forecast the same, or are they different? So I think we talked about this in previous episodes, but let's just kind of revisit it one more time.
Yeah, and the budget, and I think a lot of people intertwine those two. They're like, this is our budget, and you might hear them say, this is the forecast, and you're kind of like, well, which one is it, type of thing. But to me, the budget is really that it's a fixed financial plan, created usually in a certain year, but for the following year, and it really should be concrete. It's a static plan, shouldn't be changed. The forecast, on the other hand, is more dynamic, and it's more updated regular, and it should be. It shouldn't be static, and it should be updated with real-time information to try to help navigate the future. So putting in assumptions and what ifs, and you kind of just play around with if the worst case scenario happens, this is the outcome, and the best case, this is the outcome too, just to be prepared. So those are the differences in my mind.
I mean, I would think that, I guess when you say it that way, that the forecast is dynamic, saying, okay, given where we're actually at, because I often think of, like, let's forecast out what this year is going to look like. It's August. We have results for the first 7 months of the year, and we can make an educated guess based on information we have of what the next 5 months are going to be like, to get what would a forecasted 2025 numbers look like. So to me, that there's a lot of value in that, to say, okay, well, if everything goes as planned, this is where we're going to end up at the end of the year, profit-wise, revenue-wise, or client-wise, whatever metric you're trying to look at. And so then it makes me think, well, then what's the point of the budget? Like, if we're going to do this forecasting activity, the budget almost seems like, oh, that's ancient news. We did that 6 or 8 months ago. So what is there, like do you have a thought about, like, is there a specific use case for each one, or like now at this point in time, like which one is actually more valuable, or they just serve different purposes? Like in a scenario like this where we're like a little bit more than halfway through the year.
Yeah, and that's a really good question, right? Because the budget is I think they're both equally important, but to me that budget is that static plan. And let's say we're in August right now, that it's not too far-fetched to even having those conversations of what does next year look like, right? That's like kind of the game plan. Like this is what we're trying to do for next year. You're getting all the expectations for expenses, what's the financial goals, profitability, and you kind of depending on the how big the company is in your firm, but you might get some input from different department heads, and then that in terms of their spend maybe, and kind of what they're going to do, and kind of hold them accountable as well. So it's kind of like I call it the goal, the game plan, a roadmap for the following year. Whereas that forecast, because let's say we establish that budget in this year for next year. Next year rolls around, and there's a lot of variables that take place, unforeseen, inputs, call it that. Maybe in January, February, there's some good things that are happening, right? And that's something that to a budget, like, hey, we wanted to do what we're going to do this year, budget showing last year when we at least sat down to say this is what we're doing. And then the real kind of real time changes, the real time, call it events. There could be some real world market condition trends. Those can be inputted as variables into a forecast to say, we wanted to do this last year from a budget, but the forecast is maybe there's some new variables and this is what is going to come out. So I think, and you can kind of compare both of them, budgets to forecasts, the actuals, and you kind of can compare the information, because you can help make good decisions, from that. But I'd be curious, even for you too, Chad, of, kind of what, you kind of think the differences are.
Yeah, and I guess I feel like they're intertwined and they serve different purposes, I guess is the way I look at it, right? Because it's like, and if you want to say, okay, well, what's our budget for, the widgets, if you're counting widgets, whatever it be this year, well, that's important to have a guess about how much capital we need available over the course on a recurring basis over the course of the whole year to buy all the widgets when we need them. So that's like a strategic planning piece, versus if we are talking about where we're at halfway through the year now, it's to say, well, let's look at the forecast to say, are we going to get that profitability? Are we going to get that cash? Are we going to have that? Are we going to be in the place where we want to be at the end of the year to start the new year, based on current market conditions, current sales trends, current workforce availability, current supplier availability, et cetera. So I think that they do serve slightly different purposes, and I think the forecast can also, is also sort of like the testing of the budget, if will. It's like, okay, you make these big plans, and then halfway through the year, you're like, okay, well, we missed the boat on this one, but the other one is okay. And we just need to improve it for the following year. But then the other concept is robust, because the title here is building a robust forecasting model. So robust, what does that mean? I looked up in the dictionary because I'm like, it's a word I've heard a lot, but I hadn't really thought about it. And so came up with a couple of definitions. One is it's able to withstand or overcome adverse conditions, and adverse can be interpreted as bad or just dynamic or complex, right? And then the other one is sturdy in construction. So the point of that word is interesting too, because it's saying, okay, well, the forecasting model needs to not just be simple, if you will, right? Because the market is dynamic. The world changes. Politics change. There's the tariffs come and go. Anyway, there's all these different dynamic things, so that you need to be able to incorporate this into the model. I think that's how I understood the purpose of the title robust. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I definitely do, and that's some good input too, because I think starting off, it's like, yeah, let's have a forecast, but when you start to combine that word robust, and to me that means it's something that is very strong, it's resilient, and be able to kind of I guess withstand a lot of like the volatility and challenges, like you said, the real world events that sometimes they're both macro and micro that they're uncontrollable. But to me, having a forecast right? Because you try to predict the future, which no one can, but you can kind of get pretty darn close. But when we look at a robust, it's having a lot of these inputs into this model, so that I like to even say scenario planning, right? Like, hey, this is what we're projecting for our forecast, but what happens if things go really bad, right? Well, let's add in another factor, or maybe there's another, part two is what's the worst case scenario? What is the outcome, and then alternatively, what is the best case scenario? Like if things go way beyond what the expectations are, what does that look like too? So it kind of helps business owners navigate, the different levels of, call it, volatility in the world that we're living in. So but it also helps them pivot too. If things do go bad, it's, hey, we kind of knew what was going to happen. If things did go bad, and we have like a plan for that instead of scrambling.
Yeah, yeah. What you said there about predicting the future made me think of a couple of funny quotes I found by this guy named John Kenneth Galbraith, an economist. And one of them saying is, forecasting is the art of saying what will happen and then explaining why it didn't, right? Because, yeah, all forecasts are wrong, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and this is a little bit about what we're talking about. This is the only function of economic forecasting is to make astrology look respectable, right?
That's good.
So, but there's basically it is looking into the future, but the idea that you mentioned there is like no one can get it right, but the idea is you have a plan if the real future, when it does arrive, looks like something that you had modeled out, there's a plan to deal with it, which I think is the true value in building these. But there's also, I guess there's a couple different kinds of forecasts, right? You mentioned scenario planning, which would be, I guess I understand that being like, okay, there's a volcano that explodes in the city that your warehouse is in. Okay, well, what do you do about that? Like that's a very specific scenario. Is that how you interpret it, or do you use it more in a different way?
Yeah, no, I use it just for that, and you can essentially do it on one sheet, but sometimes you could have up on the top the way the sheet is structured, even in Excel. But I mean, you could have one, two, three options, right? And one is the base case. You have your best case, and then your worst case. But each of those three, where you can toggle between the two, should have assumptions or inputs, right? What are those inputs? So when we look at a scenario planning, you might look at those base, best, and worst case, but what does that mean? Like, is it 50% less revenue, in the worst case scenario for some sort of reason, right? Let's say a big supplier goes bad. What are we going to do? It's going to really disrupt this. Like, just having those conversations, so that when you're looking at a worst case, you kind of have some idea of, oh shoot, like this is horrible. Like it might lead to, we need to either fix that, like a plan B, so that we don't run into that situation, whatever it may be, but just having some idea. And then alternatively, it's the best case. Our base is, we're trying to shoot here. This is what we're looking like with the variables and inputs that we put in. But let's say for some reason things go well beyond than we expected. What does that look like? And so it kind of gives a lot of the lay of the land, instead of just being so more narrow focused. It opens up the doors and the mind to, if things do happen, we have a plan for it, and we're not surprised by it.
That makes sense.
Which I don't think anybody likes surprises.
Well, maybe on your birthday, but
that's a lot different, yeah.
Well, so that's one type of a forecasting. Another one is what's called a rolling forecast, right? Where and I've seen this used mostly with cash flow, where it's like, okay, well, where are we at today? How much are we going to get tomorrow? And where does that put us the day after tomorrow, if you will? Like very, maybe not daily, but weekly. Short-term forecasting is often done on a rolling basis, where it's just, okay, what do the next 3, 5, 6, 10 weeks look like? And that's, I guess, based on just most current data you have available. Any other use cases you can think of for rolling forecasts besides cash flow planning?
Yeah, and I like using, I guess both, but I think coupled with cash is great, right? I mean, it's really, I mean, you can call it ideal for the ongoing financial planning, right? Kind of looking at, the performance. It's tied to cash, quickly to be able to respond to those changing conditions. So I do like it when it's coupled like that, and you can also,
Mhm.
spot trends and issues, and it just kind of I like to say it keeps it kind of like more real time, I should say.
Yeah.
But it's great, to kind of use it in terms of especially the cash there. But sometimes it's like, you know, I don't know if like there's some sort of like companies that actually have, I don't say there some mistakes that they've made, but I mean I would like to even turn around to ask you too, of like, do you know, I guess some of the biggest mistakes that some companies I guess make when they're building it, or and maybe how they can avoid some of those.
Yeah, that makes me think about like that. One of my dad, who's also an accountant and the founder of ABT, he he always would tell clients, don't sell something that you don't know how to deliver or build, right? Like, make sure you understand what you're getting into before you make a promise to do it. And the and I think that's a little bit of the nature, is it's saying, okay, well, cool, we're going to offer this new service. Actually, this is a pretty funny one. It's not exactly financial planning, but it makes me think of like I was working actually at a fast food restaurant when I was in high school, and I think I was working in the evening. It was like 8 o'clock at night, and I think like the local police station called and said, hey, you know what? We want breakfast burritos for like the entire police station, so we want like 40 breakfast burritos, and I'm like, awesome, big order, let's do it. And so then, when my manager showed up a couple hours later, he's like, do we even have that much meat here to make 40 breakfast burritos? Like, did you even think about that? So it's like, I'm like, I don't know, I just saw big dollar signs and I was excited to have a big order. But then the reality is, so that's the nuance of saying, okay, well, what's plan A if things go well, and what's, plan B if they go really well, and not often thinking about building flexibility into your system to be able to absorb that an unexpected spike in work or an unexpected lull in work. And I think that's the part that I think lots of people, I've seen lots of entrepreneurs who mostly throw on their rose-colored glasses and just think everything's going to go swimmingly and everyone's going to say yes to all the things that I propose, and then reality hits and it's significantly more complex. So I think that understanding the flexibility is super important, and not being able to absorb those bumps in the road. So
That's great. I love the story because I feel like a lot of people are in that boat too. Have had something like that has happened.
yeah, let's see here, what else we got going on. So I guess the other thing is platforms. We can talk about that for a second. You mentioned spreadsheets, which is like sort of the classic use case um, for doing this kind of stuff. Are there, yeah, I guess, if you come across any good tools lately?
They're out there, for sure, because outside of I call it archaic now, but Excel, even though everyone I think loves it, and it's so good and easy to use because you can do a lot with just Excel, and Excel. But even you look at the accounting softwares now that it moved from those desktop versions to more the cloud-based, and using the cloud-based, you have some other options that can integrate. So when I say that, I mean there's some out there of like there's a Fathom, and um, so even some like high level QuickBooks, and some of these guys have implemented some sort of AI, right, function to it. But there's some other tools. But I mean the Fathom. There's like Data Rails, had some experience with that. But essentially you're
Yeah.
linking it to the accounting software, and you have to do some inputs as well. But it's just a tool that houses all of these kind of assumptions and forecasts that you can play around with too. But even I like using even Power BI and Tableau. I mean, those are some
Mhm.
great tools to help analyze a lot of data and really spot some trends too, and that the human eye can't really see. So it's some powerful tools out there for sure. But how about you? You come across any good ones?
Well, I guess I mean, those are all great tools you mentioned, but the other one that comes to mind is Xero, the accounting platform that we use mostly. Recently acquired Sift, and
Okay,
now it's included in all with normal subscriptions. So
great.
it's something that just was rolled out in the last 30, 60 days, that they're rolling out little by little on all the on different client by client or groups of clients, I should say. So I haven't dug into. I've been enjoying the dashboarding part of it. It's pretty cool, but there's also a projection part, and then that kind of gets back to the piece of like it's garbage in, garbage out, right? So it's like if the bookkeeping has been done well, and it's been done in a way that leverages all of the tools in the bookkeeping system, such as creating bills that need to get paid in the future, creating invoices, that create accounts receivable versus just
Yeah.
reconciling cash, then it can actually use that data point, and you can leverage all that data to actually do a pretty decent projection. So that's one that I think is going to be used significantly. And then of course, another data point here, of course, is the whole AI thing. And I mean, I guess, yeah, AI should be able to do this better. Like you were mentioning, there's something like if you're using the Power BI or the Tableau, there's things that the human eye can't even see that the platforms can detect. And I believe it should get better, right? But it's like anything else, garbage in, garbage out. Like if you're telling the machine what to do and it understands what it's supposed to be doing, then it'll work well. But if you're not sophisticated and paying attention to the details, then could you lead you a very erroneous direction.
Well, that's I mean, it's such a valid point too, but it is. I mean, garbage in, garbage out, right? Getting one of these tools that, it's not just gonna wave a wand and just literally do it all for you, because you do have to have some, kind of manual inputs of the variables, like, because it's not going to know, and it might learn the business over time, but it's just they are helpful tools, but it's just not going to like just do it for you overnight.
Yeah. See, any other thoughts you want to add in here?
Well, I think it's just such an important piece to any business, and I think it sometimes gets often overlooked. I think COVID helped kind of streamlined a lot of these what if scenarios, because that was very unforeseen, and not many people globally really was planning on a global pandemic, for that. So the people that did survive, I think, have been like, we need to start planning a little bit more. People went from, I don't know what FP&A is, to like, holy crap, we need to get it into our system and our business fast. So just having, some insights, because you make better decisions. It's more off of data, less off of, gut and intuition. And to me, you help, these what ifs, and you'll be able to navigate and pivot pretty fast. So you can kind of thrive in it.
Yep. So I guess my takeaways here are having a forecast is better than having no forecast, and building a robust forecast is as you continue to work with the forecast, they become more robust because they take into account more complexity. But it also makes me think of a final thought here, a quote by George Box, a statistician. He says essentially all models are wrong because no one can predict the future, but some are useful. So the idea here is to find that middle path where you're doing a projection, and it's actually you're able to leverage it to make better decisions in the future, which I think is the name of the game here.
That's awesome.
Well, good stuff. I think we'll wrap it up there, and on until next time, take care, and we will see you soon.
Thanks, guys.